Thank you, Professor Chandrashekar sir, for your insightful and dedicated A to D2 the strategy PPT, and thank you for student fraternity for their insightful questions. Now we'll begin with the second session. So the countries are competing at the SNT, the Science and Technology domain, to get a hand on the technological efficiency. So this has opened a field for a new conflict and contradiction between the countries. China has adopted a much effort and a long extended procedure to get a hold on the SNT technology. Two of those are the chip and the artificial intelligence. The recently US has barred the Intel and AMD to export their chip to China, which is a dual use technology. So this shows that Beijing have done a tremendous effort to achieve a epitome, especially in the use of chips. And the chips are the integral part of the AI technology as they are used to process the data. Now, this epitome that they have achieved in SNTs can be linked or encapsulated by the Made in China 2025 vision. The policy laid down the foundation to achieve expertise in different sectors, most prominently information technology, robotics. So these include AI, Internet of Things, IoT, and machine learning. This policy is closely linked with Digital Silk Road, that is DSR initiative. Some reports also indicate that one third of the 138 BRI countries are actually assigned to the DSR policies. In this changing dynamics of SNT, India finds itself in a conflicted conundrum as Beijing bids to become a global power in SNT and innovation. Delhi will face multiple threats in that domain. India needs to keep an eye on its adversaries regarding to China's development and achievement. To know more about this and this aspect, I would like to request Professor V.S. Ramamurthy sir to enlighten us with his insight and wisdom. Professor V.S. Ramamurthy sir is a well-known Indian nuclear scientist with a broad range of contribution from basic research to science and administration. Professor Ramamurthy sir started his career as Bhabha Atom Research Center, Mumbai in the year 1963. He is an elected fellow in 3 science academics, the Engineering Academy and the India and the World Academy of Sciences. As again in the first session we had an enlightful question from our student fraternity. We will think and we will expect the same from this session too. The question will be begin after the Ramamurthy sir ended with the presentation. So without extending further, sir, the floor is yours. Sorry.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you very much. Now, we had a fascinating presentation by Dr. Chandrashekar. I have been trying to find out what he does because I see him doing something. I was not very sure whether I know what he was doing, but today gave me an opportunity to understand what he was doing. One comment which he made: you may build every capability, but if there is no fellow at the end, then nothing will happen. Human resource, right? And I have been looking at human resource, what they are doing, how are they doing it. They must have got something to make this possible. Whatever he said to make that possible, there must be a man behind. From where they got that people. So this is something which I have been looking at it, and I must say that I am still looking at it in the sense that I am not ready to give a presentation like what Chandrashekar did. I am not yet ready to write a document like this. This is what has happened. But there are certain signals which I see, which all of us have been seeing, and we are trying to find out why are we not doing what they are doing, for 2 reasons. Number one, our population is almost the same, 1.3 billion. They have a lot more land, of course, but if they have got 1.3 billion people, we also got 1.3 billion people. Why are we not having those people who are delivering there with the available technologies and why are we lagging behind? So I'm going to, whatever I have seen, I'm going to share with you. And hopefully one of these days, maybe 7, 8 years down the line, some youngster will write a book on that. But we are not ready to write that book. Take for example, last 20 years and years before, both India and China became sort of independent nations, if you want to call it, in today's parlance, almost at the same time, 1948. And when I was young, China was known as a country which makes poor substitutes of something which happens elsewhere. In fact, one which I keep saying, which I have said this in this platform, C3S platform, before, we used to have a camelin pen when I was in the school. Writes well. We had no complaints, and all of us will be proudly having a camelin pen in the pocket. Some fellows will come with a Parker. Right? I can't afford it. I look at it with sadness. But there were also fellows who were having a Parker in the packet, but they didn't pay like the other fellows because those Parkers are made in China. And we asked what happened and why they don't function as the Parker from UK. Turns out the Parker were invited to come to China to start a company to make Parker pens. They're selling it cheap. And one day they said, okay, now enough, now you can go back home, and send the original Parker, and started making duplicate Parkers. And obviously the products were not as good. And so we had a camelin, and we were happy to have camelin. And some fellows had Parkers, or they are happy to have their Parkers because they had the money, and a large number of them have duplicate Parkers, which was not. Today what is happening? Suddenly we find they is competing with the United States in terms of their GDP. It was almost sudden because from 1947, 1948 to year 2000, I always say both India and China were following the developing part trajectory in terms of everything, in terms of GDP. They were making so many changes. Some were negative, some were positive. We had our own achievements, we had our own failures. But both of us are saying we are together. We have the same characteristics, same population, nothing different. Up to year 2000, that is the end of last century. I'll show you that picture how it was changing. But suddenly 2000 onwards, there is a big jump. They changed their trajectory. They moved away from the developing country trajectory to developed country trajectory, almost competing with them. Right? In which sectors? GDP. I don't understand GDP. Money. Finance minister talks about it. I don't understand it. But I do understand. Till 2000, they were saying, oh, China steals IP, China steals your students, China steals your material, everything. And 2000 onwards, they are having students. They are not stealing anything because their number of patents, they are the top number of patent filers today. They were saying 10 years before, China steals IP. Nobody talks and nobody says China steals today because they are the major generators of IP today. Number of publications, they are almost the same as United States. GDP, 80% of the GDP in United States. That trajectory, whether it is in GDP, whether it is in publication, whether it is patent, is completely different today as compared to just 20 years before. This is something which caught my eye. This is something which I start worrying about. What happened? We had the same number of people. We had the same number of, almost the same training for the last so many decades. Suddenly they went from one trajectory to another trajectory. What is it? And that is the one which also contributed to what Chandrashekar was talking about. If there had not been locally trained students in China, they wouldn't have been delivering what they are delivering today. It's not the satellites which delivers, it is the man on the back end who delivers everything. And that where we seem to have failed, and they seem to have done something which is showing results in 20 years. Now, they went through a problem during the Mao Cultural Revolution. Scientists were sent to, so literally their science was killed. They came to zero. After mid-70s only, they started taking a different trajectory. Up to 2000, it was still the old trajectory in spite of the fact that there are new management. 2000 onwards, that is the only thing which I am going to talk about. And Chandrashekar has promised me that he will help me to collate all the things and ultimately come out with a book like this by somebody else 10 years down the line. Already too late, but it's still good to know what's happening. Can I have the first slide? Huh? 202209. No, not that. Chandrasekhar. Next. Go to the next. When I try to examine what is it which China did before 2000, after 1976, which seems to have made the difference. Identified, which Chandrasekhar also identified. The first one was 1986, 10 years after the new management, the program 863. Program 863 made the following statements: strengthen R&D, research and development, not only in security technology, but also in emerging technologies. That was one major step. It was clearly made. If you want to strengthen your security, don't invest only on security, because with time, technology is going to make a contribution. And if you want to make technology contributions to security, you need to train technologies. So they said it's both research and development and in security technologies and also emerging technologies. The second one that they did was the so-called TORCH program. The TORCH program, which also came at almost at the same time as the program 8. Nurture innovation and entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurship. You may recall, this is what US did in the 60s. You get all the students from wherever they are. If you don't have students, get them from wherever they are. Train them in science and technology and encourage them to make money out of it, because they know what the money they make comes to them. That's what has happened. Whether you have Silicon Valley, whether it is Boston corridor, ultimately there are a large number of students, 10 to 20% of Indian students contributing to that. Chinese students are contributing. Students from all over the world, they are contributing. They were not only United States or anybody else. Good student is the first investment you make. That will strengthen your S&T, that will make money for you. These two programs were done, and as you may, I will point out somewhere, the programs Torch started in 1990. They formally had an incubator, technology business incubator. Interesting to note that we also start exactly on the same year, exactly under the same term, because the United Nations date. Okay, but they have moved forward. Then you look at the trajectory again, as I will show you. In spite of the fact that the 86 programs were done, very little impact on economy, very little impact on new technologies. Nothing happened. 95, they realized, listen, we don't have people. They were trying to invite people from United States to come and do their 86 program. The only thing they got, yes, a few papers were obtained, a few patents were brought, and many people were said these fellows have stolen the patents from United States, so they got a bad name. There was no impact on anything, including the GDP, which I will show you again. So they brought this 1995 project to 11, strengthen education and research in about 100 institutions of higher learning, not 10 scholarships you give. Sometimes I laugh when they say we give 10 scholarships in the name of a prime minister. It will make no difference. You need to go into villages, and wherever they are, you have to do it. Then they also said 1998, let's create more universities of world class. That means it's not Chinese standards, but they must be internationally competitive. These two programs are done. These are the four initiatives which I could identify related to science and technology and education, and which, in my opinion, gave the results. Now, why do I say that? I will show you now. Next one. First thing, when they did strengthen education, strengthen research, strengthen universities, where should it show up? The number of students. The plot of number of students, university degree holders in natural sciences between 2000 and 2012. By 1998 was the policy decision to strengthen universities. 1996 was to strengthen R&D. And where does the result show? 2002, number of degree holders started increasing, still increasing. The figure is up to 2012, even up to 2022, it continues to rise. Where are we? Here at the bottom. Japan, United, everywhere. It's the only country in the world where the number of students is increasing with time. Okay. Now you see growth of PhD degree holders. Okay, graduates is one. Is that adequate? No. R&D people should be required. Now you have plot here, again 2002 to 2012. It started with about 7 minutes, I don't remember, and has gone beyond United States in 2012, and it is continuing to rise. Where is India? The flat line continues exactly the same. Our number of R&D students at PhD level has not increased in the last 20 years. It continues to be the same, whereas China is really increasing. Again, when did it start? 2002 onwards. Right? Next. Well, one parameter which I try to plot in a very bad way. I didn't know how to make the graph. Maybe somebody would teach me how to do. R&D personnel per million population in India and China from 1990. Our number is about 0.2, remains so at 0.2. Last 15 years, that number has not changed at all. Whereas this is not, it's almost true about United States also, but it is still increasing. Ours is static, flat. But it is increasing there. But there in China, from about 0.4, it has gone to about 1.5. Right? Something like 3 times it has increased about 10 to 15. Okay, so clearly, the decision to strengthen R&D, decision to strengthen university system, decision to increase the number of students who are involved in R&D going up. And when does it show? 5 years after you started the policy decision, because an average student spends 5 years in a university. So if you start today that I will do it, 5 years later only you will see the first graduate. That is exactly what we are seeing here. So there is no doubt this is happening because of those two decisions, those two crucial decisions. It didn't happen after the decision 1986 that you will strengthen R&D. Just to say strengthen R&D doesn't lead to higher number of researchers and higher number of, you have to strengthen the education institute. Okay, what's the impact of all this? Next one. R&D spending also increasing. You see here, around 2002. Only. Beyond that, they have already they have gone beyond European Union. They are competing very strongly with the United States. Right? Now, if you spend more time, more money into R&D, where does it show up? Right? This is GDP. See the GDP up to year 1995. India and China are the same. That is what I call the developing economy line profile. It's the same. 1995 started increasing, but not big way. So effectively, the 1988 and initiatives a marginal increase, not a big increase. When did the slope change? Mid 2000. That means when the number of students and number of PhD holders, number of researchers started increasing, R&D funding started increasing, and it is in GDP, we are already competing. China is already competing with the United States, moving along. So clearly, in my opinion, the decision to invest in students, decision to invest in universities, and decision to invest in the research is showing dividends in terms of the economy and in terms of GDP. Now, people ask me, how do you know it is because of that? There is, I didn't show you a direct connection. I'm not able to show. How do I prove to you that it is the student's investment which is giving this? I'm not able to show. One of these days, I will find out how to do that. Okay? But it is definitely, whatever happened time-wise, it is same. It's a matching. 1995, you made a decision, and 5 years later, it's showing up results, and 10 years later, you're already competing with the United States. This is clearly showing. And today, nobody will say China steals our patents or intellectual property, because they are number one in intellectual property protection of the generators today. So that argument is completely left behind, dropped behind. Yeah. Okay. Before I come to, I go to the next. Okay. This is GDP is too broad number. As I said, I cannot prove to you that GDP increase took place because of this, but I have no other reason to say why GDP increased now, not in 1990 or 1980. Right? I want to take up one sector, energy. Energy is the currency of the future. If you have energy, you have everything. In the whole world, in the world economy, if you don't have energy, you don't compete. Look at energy, coal. God has given, don't make coal. It's available. And India is number two in coal. So they are there, we make use of it. But we also know Coal is a bad material for you because it is going to create new problems, already creating problems. We must get rid of coal. Oil, China has no oil. They buy oil. Natural, same, natural gas. Hydroelectric, China has plenty because large land area and plenty of natural sources of water. You are all aware of the Three Gorge Dam in the rotation frequency of the earth when it was filled. So there are plenty of effectively traditional energy. Before 2000, China was number one in two, US was in two others. Right? We are all behind this. But the message was very clear, this won't work. Because this number one energy in coal is not going to keep them number one for a long time. So it was clear. So there was a policy decision that we will get rid of coal slowly. They are still the maximum burning of coal in China, but they have taken a policy decision coal and migrate to renewable energies. Now, what are the renewable energies? Wind, solar. Okay. Now, they were not in the race for wind or solar before 2000. There was no wind solar industry in China before 2000. Today, they are number one in wind. They are number one in solar. How did it take place? How did they become number one in solar and wind today in 20 years' time? Right? There is a story in this. Number one, wind. What does it involve? Wind involves, the wind is there, but you need motors, propellers and motors that generate electricity. Motors, what do they have? A motor. And it has a magnet. You need a magnet. For every wind station, you need magnets. Now, what is the magnet technology today? It is based on rare earths. China number one in rare earths. Chandrashekar will tell you, no, they were nowhere near number one in rare earths. They didn't have a rare earths industry 30 years before. Number one in rare earths was United States. Is number two now. What happened? How did they get number one position in wind, which also requires a leading position in magnets in China? So Chandrashekar has written an article on this, how they literally stole rare earths industry, United States to China in a period of 10 years. In 10 years, they take the entire industry out of United States and establish in China. Can you do it? They do. But we know, Chandrashekar tells me how they did. Not all of them may be very royal or justifiable or anything, but they have done it. Take solar. Number one solar in 1990 was Germany. Germany was a major producer of solar panels. And suddenly you find Germany is gone. Do you see Germany? But China is. We also buy solar panel. The first solar panel which was used in Indian satellites was made in India. Today we buy it from China. What happened? Right? Two things happened. Number one, they decided that we are going to make efforts to become number one in energy, because energy is important for us. And number two, they decided that you will get that technology by hook or crook. Again, if you look at article by Chandra, there is a quotation by the president of China that the magnets, rare earths, is what is oil for Middle East. We are going to become number one in rare earths. That was a announcement made by the president, and they ensured they become number one in rare earths. All right? And this strategy is very simple. Human resource, IP, then you produce. Today, China has about 30% of rare earth resources in the world. They control 90% of the market of rare earth magnets. With 30% resources, they are controlling 90% of their magnets. They are controlling about 98% of high-end magnets. That means it's not only the rare earth resource, but also the technology. Right? And I refer to Chandrashekar's article, how they did it, but they have done it. Now, we have about 15% of rare earth resources in the world. We always had. We had a rare earth department in existence in this country for the last 70 years. Indian rare earth has been in existence for 70 years. 15% of the resource in my backyard, technology among our institutions, and dedicated structures to manage this resource. And how much is our market share in rare earths of India? A big zero. A big zero. We don't control any of the rare earths magnet market. It's a failure. And we would like to know why there is a failure there and what should be done to regain my 15%. I don't want to control 95% of this, but to regain my 15%. And you may give you an example. There was a dispute between China and Japan because of that sea in between. Okay? And they couldn't settle everything. Something was going on. They quietly one day they said, sorry, we have some problem with our rare earth industry, so no rare earth magnets, high-end magnets will be supplied to Japan. And the Japanese industry collapsed because there is nothing which doesn't have a magnet. Then they had to come to the negotiating table. Once they came to the negotiating table, rare earth magnet supply started. So effectively, they not only captured the number one position, they also started using the number one position to settle their political disputes. Nuclear. I am a nuclear physicist. Right? Our first reactors came into existence in 1960s. Tarapur was already functional in the 1960s. Then we started making our own RAP and Rajasthan and other places. The Chinese reactor came into existence in 1991. The first Chinese power reactor, I'm not talking about the bomb, I'm talking about power reactors for electricity, came into existence in 1991. 64 to 1991, 30 years later. Today, they are already number 2 in nuclear energy, because in between 1991 and 2019, they have 50 more reactors and generate 50 gigawatt in 30 years. We have been building reactors for the last 50 years, but we are nowhere near that. And brought them to number 2 position. But then you must also look at another one. United States has the largest number of nuclear reactors generating electricity today. They are the number 1 producer of electricity, that you see United States name. But where are they now? More than 80% of these reactors are 30 to 40 years old. They were built in the 60s and 70s, and 2 or 3 accidents, the 3 Mile Island accident or the Chernobyl accident, they said, no, we are not going to put this, slowed down or closed some of the reactors. Net result is, last 30 years, only a few reactors were built in the United States. No new reactors were built. The damage is not in the electricity production. The damage is today any student in his right mind will not opt for nuclear education, will he? In United States, will they go and say, I want an M.Tech in nuclear engineering today, when you don't build any reactors anywhere in the world? So clearly, nuclear education is going to be killed in United States, whereas nuclear education is thriving in China. Okay. The Chernobyl reactor started the process. Fukushima created more problems. Not for Japan. Japan, on the day of the accident, they closed all the reactors. Within a month, they started reviewing the safety. Today they have said in the next 5 years, 20% of new electricity for Japan will be produced from nuclear reactors. Germany, they closed everything. United States, they have nothing going on anyway. So clearly, nicely laid out, number one position in nuclear is going to be China in the next 4 or 5 years. What happens? Wind is number one China, solar is number one China, nuclear is number one China. We have offered the number one position on a golden plate to China. And energy is the currency of the future. Whoever has energy in surplus is going to be the market leader in industry in the coming years. Right? And not because uranium was not available, but because manpower was not available for making use of the uranium. And that's exactly what happened. Right? So this is a case where it is not making a bomb, it is not making a satellite, it is not making for anything, but it is simple day-to-day things. It's going to make a difference to you. Go back to the previous slide. What are the concerns for us, for India? When we are looking at China, not because we are writing a paper on China, but we want to know what are the lessons for us so that we don't lose out. We seem to be losing out. Number one, we are the same number of population. I told 1.3 billion population in China and 1.3 billion population in India, approximately the same number of students. But then, don't have that many students, both at the undergraduate and the postgraduate and the research level. China and India have the largest educational system in the world. Up to SSC, they are almost the same. The fraction of students who complete schooling is not very different between India and China, but the number of students in the graduate education, postgraduate education and research, India is lagging behind. And one figure which I showed you, for every Indian R&D professional in India, there are 4 Chinese R&D professionals. As a result of those 3 or 4 initiatives directly, is they have huge institutions. They have invested in universities because that was the 211 program. So consequently, a university like Beijing or Tsinghua has 50,000 students. And among the 50,000 students, almost 1/4 is an R&D, PhD level. Like our IIT system. IIT system is good. Everybody understands IIT system quality is internationally accepted. The number of IIT students have hardly increased. Only in the recent years we have started creating more and more IITs. We had a discussion earlier. Is it a good idea to increase the number of IITs or increase the number of students in each IIT? Right? If you build an IIT, for example, in Karnataka there are 4 or 5 IITs, new IITs, and the first few years the director is only a civil engineer. He has no time to teach science or technology. He is building buildings, including the wall. That is not the training. We need to increase the number of students. That was the starting assumption. So effectively, existing institutions who don't have 50,000, they can have 5,000 for every IIT. But when this proposal was put, they said, no, we have no hostels. So hostel decides the number of students we train, right? And suppose the hostel is not there, they will find a place and stay somewhere. Your classrooms are more important than the hostels. They cannot decide the number of students in IIT. That is what we are having. So net result, what is the net result? Every year, 2 lakhs students aspire to become IIT entrants. 2 lakhs. A big number. Out of which something like 1 lakh is declared fit for IIT entrance. Half of it, approximately. Out of this 1 lakh who are fit for IIT, as declared by the government, how many actually enter the IIT? 10,000. Effectively, we are making use of 10% of the people who have been declared suitable. Makes no sense. Every IIT boy should become should be in an IIT-like institution. More important, which is more important, today's system, the way in which go, because 1 in 10,000 in 200,000 is getting admission, that fellow, he doesn't believe on the plus 2 education. He goes to Baiju. Don't laugh. Baiju is the biggest damage for our education system. Right? But we are not talking about it at all. We say, oh, fantastic, a new, what is it? I don't know what. New company has come up, unicorn has come up. That unicorn is killing you. We are not recognizing that. We had already seen it earlier. IIT entrance, you don't go to your school, you go to Rajasthan, Kota. Right? Now, another damage also, the fellow enters IIT, then he starts preparing for GRE. He doesn't learn what he is supposed to be learning in IIT. He says, I must just pass. But if I get good marks in GRE, I will get in one of the United States universities. So effectively, a good system, which is delivering even today, we are not using it at all. We have given it to somebody else. This is a problem which we have to solve. More important, skilled workers. Everybody cannot be an engineer. You also need an assistant to help him. I remember in BRC, we were building the plutonium plant. Plutonium plant is once it's commissioned, you cannot open it. And plutonium gas has only pipes where the liquid goes, plutonium liquid flows around. So we need large number of welders who are 100% efficient. You cannot have a mistake because once the system is closed, you cannot open it. So one stupid welder can finish. One stupid welder can completely ruin the system. So what they used to do, there is a welding research institute built for the boiler plant. Good quality students. So they hire from there, train them further, and he works in the plutonium plant. Plutonium plant is functioning today, by the way. Right? But the point is, that guy after 3 years in the plutonium plant will be picked up by an oil industry from the Middle East for about 10 times the salary. So every 3 years they will be training more and more welders. Is that the strategy? Right? So what we need to do, we need something like the estimated, government estimate, we need about 13 million skilled workers annually in various sectors, whether it is welding, whether it is anything else. We need about 13 million. How many we train? 3 million. How will your industry thrive? They have to live with fellows who are not trained at all and use them. Is it possible? Or keep training everything? The industry trains the student where the educational institution don't. Then what makes sense? India clearly needs to scale up postgraduate education, research, and vocational education. All the three have to be boosted up. There is no question on that. Now, I also mentioned, okay, he has learned technology. Does he know how to make money? Incubators. Right? And I said the incubator program in China and India started on the same year with UNDP funding. More important, After 10 years, after 5 years, we closed the program, successfully completed. After 10 years, they had 100 incubators. India started with the first. We successfully completed. Why didn't we start more? I was a secretary, so you may ask me that question. Answer you independently over tea. He knows. Okay. But today, they have something like 200,000 incubators. 200,000 incubators. We are about few hundred. We are putting right investments, but too slow. Clearly, India needs to scale up support for innovation and techno entrepreneurship. We are already seeing that, right? But most of them are self-made. Our system cannot take credit for that. But that's the way to go. That's the way US built, and that's the way China built, and that's the way we have to go, but we are behind. Then of course, India needs to encourage participation in industries. Industry is not always there to only to cheat you. They also contribute to it, right? He was saying Musk, right? Elon Musk. Where is our Musk? You have to find out that. And philanthropic organizations, they fund. But then if I get money from, if he gets money from a philanthropic organization, he must be ready to go to jail also. Right? Otherwise it's not possible. And all non-government agencies are not cheats. They also contribute to national development in their own way. So there is a lot of thinking which is required to encourage these sectors also to in education, skill development and business incubation. We have not yet done. I am not worried about that. Someday we will have to start. What I am worried about is we don't even discuss it. We don't even recognize this is important. The new educational policy does talk about some of these things, right? But it is a 1,000 words document in which somewhere it is there. You will have to find out where it is, and then you have to implement it. It's not going to be easy. I always say India must learn to behave like a country of 1.4 billion people. We still behave like a colony of United UK. UK doesn't believe it. We believe it very strongly. Right? So my conjecture in this, we have no alternative but to strengthen and invest in education and research. We have not yet learned that message, and I will like to personally try to say wherever it is. Now I can say whatever I want. Age of 80, nobody can question you why you are anti-government, anti-system or anything. Some people ask, why didn't the hell you do it when you were secretary? I can answer that why we didn't do it. Number one, I did not know. Number two, there are constraints when you are in the system and you are outside the system. But my feeling is, as he concluded, that all the technology cannot deliver what you want unless there is a man behind it. I start from there. How do I get that man behind? Thank you very much.
Showed a graph there that the Chinese progress started from year 2000 vertically. It's from 1970 till 2000, Chinese rate of growth between 9 and 13% every year. Not a single country in the world ever grew at that, excepting United Kingdom. Immediately after the war, 1995, grew at a rate of 10%. Japanese rate of growth much lower. So in that period of 35 years, China their fountain, $3.1 trillion resource. We might have said, I have got $550 billion. That is not our foreign. Our foreign exchange is only $200 billion. The remaining 350 can go any time out of it. Big difference. Second difference, during the period, this China's number of students in the IITs, that got similar to industrial technology was 25 million, equivalent to the number of people the others. We have in the central provision for vocational education. Nobody joins. Nobody joins.